to the New Orleans Humanist Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello. Thanks again for being here with us. I'm Harry Greenberger, the host for the show for these many years. Recently, I read an article in the local newspaper that said the New Orleans Food and Farm Network was planning a new farming center near the convention center. And that was the first that I knew about this organization, which led me to get in touch with them. And my guest today is the executive director of the New Orleans Food and Farm Network, Sanjay Kharod. Thank you for being here, Sanjay.
Thank you for inviting me, Harry.
Now, all I did was just to let the people know the name of your organization. Why don't you tell us something about who you are, what you've done, what you're doing, and what you plan to do?
Sure. And actually what you said is true. Before, a lot of people do not know about the New Orleans Food and Farm Network. I think we've been around for a decade now, since 2002. I was lucky enough to now be part of the New Orleans Food and Farm Network. January 2011 is when I started 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. We've kind of flown below the radar for the last 10 years, and there, Katrina actually also affected us greatly. It started with several activists in the community looking at trying to develop a local food system. Local food system development is really popular throughout the country. They've been looking at it now for close to 20 years in other parts of the country, parts of the world. It started out with a basic premise saying that if we want to increase food access, meaning people having access to fresh food, you could grow it close by, nearby. Primarily in backyards. That's what Food and Farm Network did for the longest time, was to help people develop backyard gardens, basically raised bed gardens, using concrete blocks because we have such a wet environment that wood eventually rots in a couple of years, and filling it with soil, so that soil that is not contaminated with lead or arsenic, and then training people on how to grow food in their backyard. I call it very local food security, right there.
And you've been doing that for a number of years. Have you gotten a lot of people who are doing?
We have, I think, since 2002, over 200 backyard gardens have been built. Katrina put a little crimp in that. There's a great story that I heard from the founders that the weekend of Katrina, they did a massive backyard garden build and fruit tree planting that weekend, and the volunteers who were helping during that were getting calls from their families saying, "What are you doing? Get home, we have to go evacuate." They were not really realizing the extent of what was happening, I guess, and all of that work was washed away. And after Katrina, there was the idea that maybe the Food and Farm Network would not come back, as an organization. There's too many other things to do, and the national groups basically came to Food and Farm Network and said, no, this is an important time to think about how to have food access during the rebuilding. Let's think about that. And one of the things that was initially started was the creation of a food map for all the neighborhoods.
A food map?
A food map.
All right, what is that?
Food maps are, USDA actually has taken it to a larger extent. And the food maps were basically a survey of what food was available during the rebuilding in neighborhoods, and identifying corner groceries, supermarkets, places that were farmers markets that were, that we have a large farmers market tradition here in New Orleans. We have like basically 4 now in the city of New Orleans. But like to help with the rebuilding, when people are rebuilding, where can they access food? That was a big issue. What it identified, though, was where there was very little food available. And USDA has now taken that to a larger level, where they have the Food Desert Locator, which is a map on their website that shows neighborhoods where there's not many grocery stores at all. And New Orleans is, I think last year, was identified as the city with the worst food deserts. Basically, no grocery stores within about a mile of anywhere where populations live. So there are lots of neighborhoods in New Orleans that don't have that still.
Are we talking about Orleans Parish or the greater New Orleans area?
Well, actually, the USDA does it for the entire country by counties and parishes. And but in New Orleans, greater New Orleans, I guess, would be Jefferson Parish as well as New Orleans or Orleans Parish. Neighborhoods like St. Roch, Lower Ninth Ward, I guess it would be the 7th Ward as well, and even in Holly Grove, Carrollton area. Those areas are still food deserts. And one of the things you have to realize is, before the storm, there were food deserts. This term is kind of new, but it
wasn't that the grocery stores got wiped out. It's that they weren't even there.
They weren't even there. And one of the things that the Food and Farm Network identified, and one of the things that we started to do, is say, okay, how do we increase local food access? Because I think one of the things that, even more than just backyard gardens, so we started looking at how do we incubate farm projects in a lot of the empty land that's around. And one of the projects that we partnered with the Carrollton, Holly Grove CDC, and Trinity Christian Community was to create Holly Grove Market and Farm, which everyone now knows about this. It's an amazing market, and it's also a growing site where local growers get trained to grow.
And then where is that?
It's on Olive Street in the Holly Grove neighborhood. Olive Street, right off of Carrollton. It's right behind the post office right there.
Okay.
And it's been operating now for 3 years, and it's been rather successful. And what we found was it's become a regional market, a market for regional food. Like farmers come there and sell to the market, and then that is then sold to local people. We also have a training center there where local growers are mentored by a farmer that's there, and they learn how to grow on their community beds, and they can sell at the market or take it home. The piece that you saw in the newspaper is actually scaling that up to another level of basically creating a training research farm that we can show different technologies of growing food. It's not just growing in soil, because one of the big issues we have is we have contaminated soil in a lot of the neighborhoods. We have a lot of lead, we have arsenic, and there's certain levels of lead that you should never grow in, and that is one of the reasons why we encourage raised bed growing. Basically, you're not growing in that soil that's contaminated.
Now, in that new facility, where do you get the good soil? Where does that come from?
That's always been a challenge. We often buy soil from several soil sources. There's Sugarland soil, which is in Belle Chase, down near Belle Chase. There is Eco-Urban that does a lot of composting, and they're in the city. They do a lot of intensive composting of coffee grounds with organic materials, and then that leads to having
compost. You determine that they're not contaminated.
Yeah, and we do soil testing on any sites that we actually work on. And then there's also Laughing Buddha Nursery that is out in, I guess it would be Metairie or Kenner, that area, but they are also expanding to actually create a larger facility near Harahan. So, I mean, there are sources, but the thing is that is a major expense for growing
Yes.
in clean soil.
Does
and
that
actually,
make the products more expensive than something similar you would buy in the supermarket?
Yes. I mean, one of the things you would buy in the supermarket, I mean, this is always an issue in like transforming the food system, is that our food system is heavily subsidized for big agriculture.
Yes.
And it is subsidized by using a lot of petroleum products in actually harvesting and also producing it, but also then there's fertilizers as well. So there is that issue of long transport and using a lot of these chemical inputs for growing food. So that makes that products a lot cheaper. What we encourage is sustainable growing, organic growing. We don't necessarily advocate just organic growing, but definitely sustainable growing, because the inputs for the farmer are cheaper than using chemicals and machinery. And one of the things that we realize is that there's a lot of labor involved then when you do sustainable growing, because you're not using a lot of machinery. And what we're hoping to do is, with this training center that we're trying to create, is training and mentoring new urban farmers and even regional farmers eventually to become part of the local food system, so that maybe the economics of scale would change, where then local food would be comparable to food that might be coming from California.
When you say urban farmers, are you talking about people doing something in their backyard or the next door lot, or do they actually have some acreage?
Well, we have a problem which I call an opportunity in this city, where we have tens of thousands of empty lots, post-Katrina, even pre-Katrina. We are looking at backyard growers are basically growing for themselves. I mean, there are some backyard growers that grow a great deal. I mean, their entire backyard. It's not just one bed, it's the entire backyard. What we're looking at is, how do we work with, let's say, like with the lot next door, we actually have several we have 2 or 3 tenant farmers that are contracting with private landowners with the lot next door program, where they are actually growing food and selling food to individuals through a community-supported agriculture arrangement, which is people buy shares into that farm, and then they basically get a box of produce once a week.
All right. So generally, do these local producers, are they just selling to individuals, or do some of the restaurants or supermarkets buy from them?
Right now, what we have is we have individual buying, we have selling at the farmers market. Actually, at Sankofa's farmers market, they have a lot of local growers over in the lower 9th Ward. We are working with the Crescent City Farmers Market to actually bring back what they used to have, was the local growers table, so they could sell there. Restaurants are also buying from a lot of these farmers. And stores, not yet. One of the big issues about selling to a supermarket is the liability insurance on being able to sell, so that if anybody gets sick off your products, that you have insurance for that. There's also, we're developing food safety standards and good agricultural practice standards that growers can follow, then it would be easier for them to sell to local stores. But let's say like Rouse is looking at buying from local sources. Whole Foods, even though it's I think you have to be a larger producer to be able to sell to them, they're looking at that as well. I'm not sure about the other supermarkets, but the idea is that if we provide, when we talk about the training for urban farmers, it's not just how to grow, but it's also how to market it, what are the legal issues that they need to do, what kind of business planning that should they do, so that if they do really want to take an empty lot and turn it into farm, they understand all the different hurdles they have to get through to get there.
Now, are these people whom you are training, is their intention that would be their full-time occupation, or is this something they do in their free time?
We just had our first. We were piloting our first new and beginning urban farmer training. We just had that at the beginning of November, and most of them are looking at going to do it full time, because right now they're doing it at a smaller scale while also working at a different job. And the idea here is this is another form of economic development that we could see in the city, and we have the opportunity with all this land. So one of the things I talk about is there are 4 obstacles to becoming a farmer in this city. There's access to land, and we're trying to work through that. There is adequate training and mentoring, existing farmers mentoring new farmers. We have some urban farmers in the city that are clearly ready to, show the day-to-day work that you need to do to basically become a farmer. We also have some farmers in the region, like on the North Shore, who are willing to mentor as well. And then the third thing is seed funding to actually start a farm. Often that is buying the soil, buying irrigation equipment, fencing, things like that. And then the fourth thing is marketing. And we're trying to basically fill those boxes with information and support to make that happen.
If someone wants to do like a lot next door, or a fairly large-scale operation, and you're talking about the initial costs of setting up, how much money does it take to start something like that?
We've estimated, and that's a good question. There have been many estimates, and one of the things we've estimated is that it's about $10,000 for one city lot, and that's a 30 by 100 lot, a 3,000 square foot lot.
And that includes bringing in good soil?
The primary cost of that is the soil, and that's one of the reasons why we are looking at many different models and strategies to increase food growing. The farm center that we are developing is a way of showing those different technologies. It's not just soil-based growing. There's also aquaponics, which is fish farming, that then the fish waste, the fish poop, basically is recirculated through the plants, either in soil or outside of soil, like in tubes, to basically then be able to grow those vegetables. One of the interesting things about aquaponics is that you can grow lettuces and herbs even in the summertime when it's really hot here. So with shade cloth and making sure that you have this recirculating system in place, you can actually then increase what you can produce at what season, because that's one of the big issues that I had to learn coming down here from New York was the seasons are different here. You can grow 365 days a year, but essentially the fallow season in New York would be in the wintertime. Here it's the summertime.
When you say aquaponics, which means you're growing fish for sale, for the market, and what kind of fish?
Right now, in New Orleans East, they are growing fish as well as through this aquaponic system, and there are some small-scale ones that we're looking at developing, one in Algiers, and there's one in the Lower Ninth Ward right now. Right now, they eat the fish.
What?
They just eat the fish. They do not sell the fish.
They're
we are
not
working
selling.
through the legal issues of that fish, and so some of the fish, like one of the most successful fishes around the world is tilapia. However, in the state of Louisiana, you need to put up a very large amount of money, a bond, to basically grow tilapia. So, because tilapia was farmed in, I believe, Arkansas about 10 years ago, and they were released into the wild. And tilapia are like guppies. They're super fish. They basically produce greatly, and they take over ecosystems. So tilapia is an amazing fish, and you see it everywhere in stores, and the reason why is it produces rapidly. So there's also red snapper. We're looking at, actually at the farm center, we will be looking at growing native plants that need brackish water that will be aquaponically connected to growing redfish, because redfish is kind of a very profitable thing as well. So we're working through the legals of actually being able to sell that. Right now, the idea is essentially it is locally based fertilizer in a lot. And the way we're looking at aquaponics being adopted is that there might be an aquaponic system as well as soil-based growing in a city lot, so that there is there's a kind of a increasing the fertility of the soil is really important, because you could buy soil, but then you have to think about how to keep it fertile. So, you could do cover cropping like peanuts and beans that put nitrogen into the soil, but also aquaponics might be another addition to that as well.
You suggested that because of the need for startup costs, that are you looking for sources of grants or financing or something?
And in fact, actually, next week I have a meeting with a group out of D.C. that will be coming down to look at the different forms of financing. I mean, there are different forms of financing for this. I mean, there are loans that you can take from the Federal Credit Union we've been talking to. One of the things they tell me is, it's interesting, is that the second most riskiest thing to finance is farming. The first is a restaurant. So that's kind of interesting. So we're looking at that option. We're looking at the Farm Service Agency out of the USDA that might be able to provide small loans for farmers, but they have a limit of a 1 acre or more financing system. So we're trying to see if we can do a smaller lot, because essentially one lot is 1/12 of an acre.
Can someone make a living off of the produce from a lot?
Probably not from one lot. I mean, I'll to be honest, we have one of our mentor farmers, and who was one of the founders of Food and Farm Network, Macon Fry. He grows on about half an acre, and I think it's estimated that you can make about, from very intensive growing and selling to restaurants. He grows a lot of arugula and a lot of basil, and that goes to restaurants. It's about $16,000 a year. So you're not going to get rich being a farmer. I mean, it is not the most lucrative job. At the same time, when you don't have a lot of jobs around, you start thinking about, well, okay, that's a primary economic activity. Then what we're looking at, hopefully, is if we have enough of this activity, we can start thinking about maybe, making food products out of this local food. Let's say like canning tomatoes and making tomato sauces, and having a certified kitchen where you can do that, so then you can then sell to a store, and that would be getting a value-added benefit to that. So that's really what we're doing, is we're looking at the building blocks. I mean, if you're talking about the urban agriculture or agriculture, that's like the primary product. And once you have enough of that, you start thinking about what's the next level or scale that you can go to, and that would be food products made from these local ingredients. And that's what we're hoping to do. Like, we have to first get that base going, and then we start looking at what else we can do.
What is the size of your organization? How many people do you have there working on these projects?
Right now, we have a very small organization. As staff-wise, we have 3 people. We have a very active board that is involved. We also have a lot of volunteers and interns. But the main thing about what we do is we are a partnership organization. That means we partner with other groups. So one of the things, like what you were talking about, the Farm Center, we are incubating that project. We incubated Holly Grove Market and Farm. We're trying to think about how to incubate other, and the point of incubation is, after a period of time, we are working with a neighborhood group or a neighborhood organization that will then take that project and carry it forward, so then we can help others. So we don't run a farm. We incubate things with people who are going to take it on, because the idea here is, instead of them working for us, we want them to be their own bosses and basically create jobs within those communities, because I think that's one of the things that we've heard from a lot of the partner groups that we talk about is, we need jobs. We need to be able to have some income from this activity beyond just having great food or having nutritious food. And one of the things that we've been trying to do on our website is we've tried many different ways of trying to sort of collaborate all this activity. We've created this, what I call the Craigslist of food, which is the Food and Farm Exchange, which is a way of people to kind of get a sense of the value of their food. So like if you have a lot of squash and someone has a lot of tomatoes, maybe they could like exchange or barter or even sell to each other. And it's really to sort of take small scale growing and seeing if they can make some money doing this, then maybe they'll want to scale up and take an empty lot. And that's really the idea. Is we have this term, what we say, we've grown growers, meaning we've trained people up, and now they're looking for more challenges, and they can actually handle that. And that's, I think, what Food and Farm Network is now looking at, is like, okay, we have these growers who are ready to scale up because they're growers. They're not necessarily urban farmers. Farmers are taking a more of greater risk at growing on a larger scale, and that's what we want to do. So we're still going to keep growing growers, but then we also have to create that next level of urban farmers. And then once the urban farmers are really doing, we have a core group of that, then we're going to then look at, okay, now what else should we do? And that's, we started out really as an organization that wanted to fill a gap. Basically, there was a great farmers market tradition, but we didn't have enough growers, and there still was lack of food, so we started with backyard gardens. Now we're looking at, okay, people are really interested in this, they want to do more. Now let's talk about incubating some farms, and then once they want to do that, it's like, okay, now they want to think about marketing. Let's now talk about how do we get more restaurants involved, more stores involved to basically do that.
Well, you mentioned partners or partnerships. What is that? And we've just got a couple of minutes to go, but what are the partners that you're talking about?
Okay, well, we have an approach that we work with neighborhood groups to create and develop and then eventually manage neighborhood-led projects. So a lot of the partners, let's say the citywide partners that we work with, Crescent City Farmers Market. Actually, the director of that was one of the beginning founders of it. So basically, Crescent City Farmers Market is definitely one of our partners. But we also partner with the Louisiana Public Health Institute because they're interested in nutrition, right? And then we're basically trying to make people aware that you can actually grow food in your backyard.
Now, if people want to get in touch with you for whatever reason, tell them how they do that.
Sure. I mean, I guess you could either call our office, which is area code 504-483-6967, and you can also look at our website, which is noffn.org. We have transformed our website to basically be a resource base for different types of activities. So if there's internships or there's job opportunities, they're there, as well as other news.
Sanjay, thank you for being here with us. I wish you much success in your project.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for watching our show. Be with us again.